So, go ahead and get started. We are going to talk about different kinds of signals. Signs of comfort are called distance decreasing behaviors. Basically, the dog is saying, hey, come closer, I want to be friends, I want to be closer to you. We're going to talk about signs that dogs are ready to play. We're going to look at their body position, different parts of their body that show that they're comfortable and at ease. And then we're going to talk a lot about signs of discomfort. So distance increasing behaviors, saying I need space, back off, I need more room. We're going to talk about displacement behaviors, signs that the dog is conflicted. I kind of want to say hi, but I'm also kind of nervous. I'm not sure what to do. Calming signals and stress signals. Those are sometimes used interchangeably, but I'm going to make a little bit of a differentiation for us. And we're going to talk about warning signs that a dog may be going to bite. So they're giving us warning signs ahead of time saying, please, if you go any further, I'm going to have to defend myself. Most common reasons for a bite are fear, frustration, and over-arousal. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about appeasement gestures, which could be signs of comfort or discomfort in terms of distance increasing or increasing or decreasing. This could be to put another animal at ease, to calm or soothe them, like let's be friends, or it could encourage them to back off, basically avoid conflict and keep the peace. So I will email everyone a copy of this presentation afterwards, and all of those little blue bits are links, so you can actually view this later on, share it with family, friends, and follow up if you want to learn more about something, and you can see all my sources. So one big thing I want to talk about is behaviors of the study 1. Every dog is an individual. So you can have variations between dogs and what their body language is. If you think of a dialect. So I'm from the Midwest and I grew up saying pop, and then I moved out here and I started saying soda. It's the same word, essentially means the same thing, but it's a little bit different. So you may have dogs with a little bit of personal variation. This can be influenced by their genetics, past experiences, things they like, things they don't like. And we're only going to be able to cover, a small selection of possible behaviors because there's an infinite number of variations and combinations. And then really the reason why I think this class is so important and why it's so helpful for us that you guys take it is so that you can help give us observations of overt behaviors. Overt means these are things that we can measure, we can assess, we can see. So it's the dog yawned, the dog was pacing, the dog lowered its head and growled. That is objective, as opposed to things that are subjective. If you tell us, the dog is sad, the dog was happy, scared, could be subjective, it could depend on interpretation. But if you tell us exactly what you observed, and we all have the same language to describe it, we're gonna have a more accurate idea of what actually happened. So that's why this is so important to me. Things that are covert are things you can't see, like I said. Those are when we're making assumptions about what's going on inside the dog's head, which of course we can't know for sure, we're just making guesses. Constructs are explanations and theories based on those assumptions. So that's when we start getting into really saying, oh, this dog is aggressive, this dog is stubborn. Again, these are not concrete definitions. What aggressive means to you may not mean the same thing to someone else. So if you're two professionals, you've worked together for a long time, you could probably use these words as shortcuts. So if I say, the dog was reactive to Katie, Katie's gonna know pretty much what I meant by it. But if I'm talking to a doctor or a volunteer, we may not have 100% the exact same definition, which is why using the overt observations are so important. And then we want to avoid constructs because that ends up putting labels on a dog. We say that this dog is a certain way all the time, this is who they are. Whereas behavior changes in the moment, we always want to look at what we're seeing in the moment. My behavior today is not indicative of who I am as a person. So a dog can have a bad day, or they can have a good day, just like us. And we want to consider everything in context, so we're always going to look at the body language as a whole, not just one piece of it. Common mistake is someone looks just at the tail. They say, oh, the tail is wagging, the dog must be happy. The tail wagging can just mean stimulation, that they're just excited by something. We want to consider whether we know the dog's history or if we don't. So again, we're in a shelter. A lot of these dogs are brand new. We may not know anything about them. So we're going to be a little more cautious, and we're really going to look at that body language and maybe take it kind of at face value. Whereas my own dogs at home, I know them really well. I know all their little quirks. Dogs can give us a bunch of signals at once, sometimes signals that don't really jive together. And keep in mind that as we go through this presentation, there's a lot of photos and videos where we don't 100% know exactly what's going on. So I'm making guesses just based on a picture. Something else could be going on. And this is Ed. Anyone want to guess why I chose Ed for this slide?
He's unique.
He's unique! Yes! Perfect! Ed is unique. Behavior is a study of one. Ed is a totally unique dog. Things that Ed does, other dogs might not do, and we have to take that into consideration. He's named after Ed the hyena in The Lion King. You can see why. So Ed had cropped ears, Ed has a lazy eye, his tongue was hanging out all the time, kind of walked funny, he breathed funny, made a lot of snorting noises. So the way Ed acts may not be the way every dog acts. So we always have to look at them as an individual. And I said we were going to talk a lot about stress. Biggest thing I want to talk about is distress versus eustress. Distress is what we probably usually think about when we say stress. I'm worried, I'm nervous about something, maybe I'm a little anxious. Eustress is what we might call a good stress. I'm excited about something, I'm anticipating something good. So I'm ready to enter a competition, or I'm ready to give a presentation, or go on a roller coaster. I'm excited, and this is the kind of stuff that can fuel performance, keep us at the top of our game. So you may see eustress with dogs, meaning like I'm about to do a play group, or I'm about to go on a walk, or I'm doing training, and so I'm really excited. But stress still means something is going on in the body. So keep in mind that eustress is still having an effect on the body. So we'll talk about that kind of stuff, but it doesn't necessarily mean the dog is upset. They're just experiencing some kind of stress, meaning, you know, our heart rate increases, maybe we have more muscle tension, adrenaline, cortisol go up. And we all need a little bit of stress in our life. No stress, we're just gonna sleep all the time. You know, we're gonna be bored. Too stressed, we're gonna get sick, we're gonna get burnt out. We might lash out at people. Dogs can experience the same thing, and all of the dogs here, you could have 10 dogs in a row, all technically experiencing the same event, but they're all going to experience it in a different way. Some dogs, they come here, and it's not that exciting to them, it's not that interesting to them, this is just not stimulating, and they sleep all the time. They may seem like they're bored or depressed. Other dogs, it gets them really amped up. They're spinning, they're jumping, they're drooling, they're barking. It's very, very stressful for them. So just like people, we can all experience events with different stress levels. Again, everyone is an individual. So we're going to talk about signs of dogs feeling at ease. We'll go through all of these. And the one thing I do want to point out is that some of these ones at the bottom, humping, body checks, a muzzle nudge or a muzzle punch, growling, barking, whining, any kind of vocalization, these can all be signs of play. You know, they want to be distance decreasing behaviors, come closer, let's be friends. But you can also end up being signs of over-arousal. So if the play gets too amped, some of this stuff can escalate, tip over to the other side. So some of this I'll talk about later when we get to the discomfort section. So ears high and back or normal. So whatever is the normal resting position for the dog means they're at ease, they're comfortable, relatively relaxed. Again, it may be slightly different for each dog. I like that I have a shepherd in here because our ears are naturally pricked all the time, but you can see how it's just kind of set like high and back on its head to the side. It's not pushed forward or pinned back, just kind of resting in the middle there. Mouth open and loose. So the tongue is out to the side. There's not a lot of tension there. Even when the dogs are playing, we're not seeing like teeth bared a whole lot. They're still breathing nice and easy. When the mouth starts closed and tense, that's when I start worrying. Loose, wiggly body. We've all seen this in dogs before. So when you see that whole body wiggle where the rear is just going completely from side to side, the tail is going from one side to another, that is a very happy, relaxed, comfortable, playful dog. We can see this in the kennels all the time. You see that? The dog is probably saying, I'm excited to see you, please come in, I'm a nice, friendly dog. And this is more of I'm very happy when I see this kind of tail wagging. Tail wags can mean different things depending on the dog. If it's high and up like this, can mean I'm very aroused, I'm very excited. Low and slow could mean I'm a little nervous and being cautious. So when I see it kind of all over the place or really big, wide sweeping side to side, it usually means the dog's more comfortable. Tail resting at half mast or normal, so it's just kind of a neutral body position. And then this next slide, this is my selfish slide, because these are my dogs. So I just like to see them in here. But I use videos of them later on because they're my dogs and I know them really well, so I know the context and what's normal for them or not normal for them. So the red dog is Weasley, you'll see a lot of him. The white dog is Griffin. Weasley is super expressive with his tail. It's very dramatic. I can really tell how Weasley is feeling by his tail. He uses it a lot. Griffin, his tail is in half mast most of the time. I don't get as much expression from his tail. Even when he's happy, it's more of a body wiggle. He's just not much of a tail wagger. Weasley, you can tell when he's super, super aroused or maybe really stressed because you've almost got like the scorpion tail here where it's almost touching his back. I know he's really aroused. And then you can tell he relaxes a little bit more and more and more. The tail goes down. I know he's feeling more comfortable or maybe he's getting tired. Okay, so commissure, that is the joint, the juncture between the lips. So where the lips meet in the corner, that's called the commissure. We want to see it without too much tension. So it goes along with an open, loose, relaxed mouth. Dogs at the top, commissure's relaxed. You don't see too much pinching or pulling in either direction, as opposed to the pictures on the bottom. This, the one in the middle and the one on the far right, I think it's pretty obvious. These are dogs that we are not going to invade their space. They're clearly telling us to back off. So you can see how there's all that tension in there and it's pushed forward. And then there's the dog on the left and the bottom. It's pulled back tight. You see the wrinkle in the cheeks, but I'm looking at the dog as a whole. The ears are pinned back. The forehead is pinched together. It's wrinkled. And even that tongue like that with that bold tongue. The dog is probably stress panting. My guess is that this dog is experiencing some kind of stress. This is what my dogs look like at the vet. It's just, that's a good sign that their dog is stressed. So because that commissure is pulled back like that, it's another hint to me that this dog is experiencing stress. A play bow, we all know what that means. I want to play. Everything that follows after this, it's all in good fun. It's a great way for dogs to tell other dogs, hey, I'm friendly. If I'm doing a dog-dog introduction and I see this, I'm like, oh, thank goodness. Like, now I know we're okay. A great way to get a dog to interact with you is to do a play bow. There's actually been scientific studies on this. Owners interacting with their dog, the best way to get the dog to interact with them is to bend over at the waist and to wiggle. Gets the dogs to play. So I love to see a play bow. A paw raise. I kind of think of this like, boop, you're it. Basically, let's be friends, come closer, play with me. You'll experience with this with dogs and you. The dog's pawing at you. Pet me, hey, be friends, come closer. So this you see with dogs playing all the time. You'll kind of put it up on the other dog to get them to interact with them. So here we're gonna see the muzzle nudge or muzzle punch. So the black dog, clearly not a care in the world. He's more focused on the person with the camera. Maybe they have a ball, mouth open, loose, relaxed, ears kind of neutral position, a loose wagging tail. not bothered by the brown dog at all. What I'm looking for when there's dog interactions is the play mutual? You know, is the other dog affected by this in a negative way, or do they not care? That's going to change how I either interrupt or let the play continue. Brown dog, all of this muzzle punching, we know it's playful because it's light. It's punch back, punch back, punch back, and he's doing all these nice play bows and wiggly behavior while he's doing it. So all he's saying is, play with me, pay attention to me, play with me, play with me. So even if maybe the other dog thought it was obnoxious, he's still just trying to play. This video goes on for a long time, so if you're ever sad, just watch it, you'll feel better. Anybody want to say what the puppy's doing?
Trying to get that thing to play with him.
Yes! Yeah, he's trying to get the ball to play with him. He's doing everything in the book that we taught. Paw rings. He's doing play bows, muzzle punches. He's loose, wiggly, mouth open and relaxed. He's doing everything he can to get the ball to play back with him. So puppies are great. They always show us all of this wonderful, playful behavior. And so if you see that, you're like, oh, dog's just trying to play with the other dog or play with me. Okay. So we're going to end up watching this video later on as well. So just pay attention to the red dog, Weasley. So if you just heard this without watching the video, it sounds very dramatic. You might think, ooh, that dog is scary. But what are we seeing body language-wise from Weasley that lets us know that this is play?
Loose and wiggly.
He's loose and wiggly.
Tail wag.
What's that?
Tail wag.
Kind of a looser tail wag. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But he's doing play bows. He was doing paw raises. He was kind of doing a muzzle punch, almost like when you see like that side, like mouthing. That's the type of play. You know, he's not baring his teeth or anything. We'll watch this again later and talk about Griffin's reaction and what that means. And we'll talk about the behavior that Weasley does at the end when he's digging in the bed after we've kind of talked about that stuff. So there's lots of stuff going on in here, but you know, Weasley, even though it sounds terrible, his intentions are play. Whether Griffin agrees or not, that is Weasley's intention. So we've got a couple of kids here where there's lots and lots going on. So we'll watch it through once and then I'll play it again. Alright, I love that video. There's so much going on here, so I'll go through it again and talk about things as they happen. It always does that. Alright, so white dog trying to get our attention. He's just barking to get our attention. So that sneeze may be something called a displacement behavior, which I'll talk about even more later on. Like I said in the beginning, displacement behavior can be a sign that the dog is in some kind of conflict. The reason why I think it's a displacement behavior and not just a regular sneeze, so this is behavior that happens out of context, right? Obviously a dog can sneeze because he has dust in his nose or he has a cold. Displacement behaviors happen out of the normal context. So maybe that basement is dusty. However, the other dog later on also sneezes. Dogs can have an empathetic reaction, just like I yawn and then you yawn. There's such a thing as emotional contagion. Feelings can kind of be contagious. So because the other dog sneezes later on, it kind of makes me think that maybe this little white dog is in conflict somehow. Maybe he wants our attention, but he doesn't want to push us anymore. He does do kind of like a down or a play bow here. So that beautiful behavior that I love to see, that's something called splitting. So dogs will do this a lot, either with people or in dog-dog interactions, where they are trying to break the tension or potential conflict. So it's a way of just dispelling that tension. So if you ever watch dogs play in a big group, you'll see that this happens a lot. Maybe if one dog is being a little pushier and the other dog is not feeling it, a lot of times you'll see a dog cut through them. Griffin and Weasley do this at the dog park all the time. Weasley's being a little weird, the other dog doesn't like it, and Griffin goes, cuts in between them, which distracts Weasley. Weasley kind of follows him, where the other dog is like, oh, I'll play with that dog instead. And you see with this with dogs and people sometimes too. So I love splitting. So dog in the back, also kind of doing this huffing. He's licking his lips. We'll talk about that later. Can be a sign of stress. He's sneezing again. Body check. So that's usually a way to initiate play, or just, hey, I want your attention, pay attention to me. And then all that lovely kisses on the cheek, that's an appeasement gesture, just no hard feelings, let's be friends. Hope you didn't take that personally. But you see a lot of these body checks in play. You see a lot of them, like, you call them like a booty bump, but the dogs are just like bumping into each other as a way of being playful. Okay, so the controversial slide. Everybody always asks about, why does my dog hump? Why are they mounting? Why are they doing this? This is embarrassing. It's normal dog behavior. Dog is not weird. It's nothing sexual, unless of course the dog is not spayed or neutered and they're actually trying to mate. A lot of times it's just a sign that the dog wants to engage the other dog in play. There have been studies, and I have the link at the bottom, where they were looking at dogs in a group and they found that humping was usually associated with other play signals, or they call them affiliative, so friendly behaviors. So usually if the dog is humping, they're usually a friendly, playful dog. A lot of times you'll see one dog hump and then they'll switch roles. The other dog will hump them right back, or they'll chase, run, do other things, and break it up. Sometimes the dog can be a little insecure, they're experiencing some kind of stress or conflict and they don't really know what else to do, and so they do that instead. So sometimes you see that with dogs that haven't had a lot of experience socializing with other dogs or younger dogs, you tend to see it. So maybe they just don't know how to play, so they're doing that instead. Or it can start to be a sign of over-arousal. So some dogs will just do it when they're really excited. So people ask about this and say, yeah, every time I have company over, my dog starts humping the pillow or their stuffed animals, or every time I come home, my dog does this. It's because the dog's excited and they don't know what to do with it. So you'll see this sometimes here in the kennel. The dog will want to hump you right when you go in the kennels because they're so excited. Or when you leave, they start doing that to their bed or their blankets or a toy. It's just a way of dealing with some kind of stress or frustration or feeling, but it doesn't mean anything bad. So you can actually see, I like the one on the top, because that dog, he's got his tongue hanging out to the side, ears are just in that high back, open, loose mouth. He doesn't care. Doesn't bother him at all. So people ask, is this a dominance thing? Is this like the dog being alpha? I could go into a 2-3 hour presentation about dominance theory and why it has been thoroughly debunked. I don't have time to do that, but if this is something that you have questions about, you're curious about, you're like, what? I thought dominance theory was everything about dog training. Please check out these resources. Yeah, I could talk about it forever. So here's an example of two dogs from here. And that black dog is a younger dog, but they were playing great. Back and forth, lots of playful, friendly behavior. That's Pinto, the white speckled dog, and he was getting humped over and over and over by the black dog. And so I was like, ooh, I can actually get this on video. And he goes right back to engaging with the dog. So that's when you know it's not really a problem where you need to intervene. A lot of people are super quick to jump on the dogs and pull them off or tell them no. They handled it just fine themselves. And he still wants to play. So if I do see a situation where a dog is humping another one and that dog is like shutting down and is clearly uncomfortable, and I'm seeing more of those signs of distress that we'll talk about later, that's when I'll intervene and try to, help that dog out and get the other dog off of them, because it's not mutual. The other dog's not having any fun. But a lot of times they'll work it out themselves, and like in this case, they don't care at all. It's just all play. He's doing paw raises, all kinds of stuff. And then he does it again. So he just doesn't really, sometimes he just doesn't know what else to do. But you can just see that they're both relaxed, loose, happy, having a good time. Yeah, everyone's good boys. I almost called him a good boy just as I said that, because he looked at me and smiled. I was like, oh, what a good boy. So yeah, I don't intervene unless I'm seeing that it's causing tension between the dogs, but if it doesn't seem like it's a big deal to the dogs, then I won't necessarily do anything about it. So now we're going to dive into the discomfort. I think, we can tell just by looking at this picture, this dog is not thrilled. And he's giving a lot of signs that we'll talk about. I'll probably bring up whale eyes a dozen times, but that's where you see the white of the eye. Some people call that a half moon eye. But other things we've talked about already, like the ears being pinned back, tight closed mouth. Maybe he's just being squished. Maybe 5 seconds later, the kid let go and the dog didn't care. I mean, gave him kisses and, was all happy. But in this picture, he does not look comfortable. So we'll talk about all of this stuff. There's a million signs that the dog is uncomfortable. We're focusing on it because we're working in a shelter environment. Any of these behaviors just mean stress of some kind. So the dog could be, maybe a little bit anxious or excited, but a lot of times it could mean they're unsure, anxious, conflicted, uncomfortable, just some kind of stress. The only thing I don't really get into is excessive water drinking. This can actually kind of be a displacement behavior. A lot of times a dog arrives, they're new to the center, you put them in the kennel, the first thing they do is drink a ton of water. That's just a way of them dealing with stress. Some dogs will do it all the time. And it's just their way of dealing with stress. And then I don't really talk about repetitive or obsessive behaviors, like spinning or head bobbing, chasing shadows. Any kind of obsessive, repetitive behavior is a sign of stress. Okay, so calming versus stress signals and displacement behaviors. So I make a little bit of differentiation between calming and stress signals. Calming signals is a term that was coined by Turid Rugas, so a Norwegian dog trainer. She put out a book on calming signals. Basically, these are behaviors that are a response to self-soothe or to calm another animal. And a lot of people will use calming and stress signals interchangeably. This is just an example of something where there's not scientific terminology, it's more of jargon. Stress signals, I'm going to call those things that are physiological, unconscious behavior response to stress, so things that can't be helped. And then displacement or avoidance, so the dog is in some kind of conflict between two different feelings. So calming signal in a person, for me, take a deep breath, sigh, stretch, lower my voice, talk more slowly. This is my way as a human putting out calming signals. So I can use it to diffuse tension, calm people down, calm myself down, and everyone suddenly feels better. Displacement or avoidance, so if I'm just uncomfortable, I'm not gonna look at someone, I'm gonna avoid eye contact, walk away because I feel uncomfortable. Displacement behaviors, for me it's cracking my knuckles, twisting my hair, pacing, peeling the labels off of beer bottles. I do that at parties when I'm uncomfortable. That's a displacement behavior. It's not a necessary behavior, may not make sense in the context, but it's something I do to alleviate my social anxiety. Stress signals, these are things I can't help. So cold fingers, sweaty palms, tummy gurgles, that's all stuff I can't help. Cold sweat, that's all stuff I can't help. That's stress signals. So it's kind of similar for dogs. So we'll go into all of this. Right. And appeasement gestures, these are the ones that are just trying to avoid conflict and keep the peace. So these could be distance increasing, like back off, hey, I'm no threat, don't hurt me. Or distance decreasing, like we saw with the little Jack Russell Terriers where he's kissing his brother on the mouth. That's saying, hey, no hard feelings, take it easy, let's be friends, come closer. The big one that we're gonna jump into later, but I wanna point out, is the difference between what it can mean when a dog rolls over on their back and shows you their tummy. Doesn't always mean the same thing. You have to look at all of the other signals that the dog is giving, their body language all in context. So belly rubs, if you see all that other stuff that we talked about earlier, open loose mouth, relaxed open body, dog is wiggly, dog wants belly rubs. Dogs, generally that's the dog saying, yeah, rub my tummy, I love it, I'm having fun. Let's say the dog shows the belly, but we're not 100% sure. Maybe it's kind of hesitant, and you think, oh, maybe they want belly rubs. And then you're like, oh wait, maybe they don't. I'm not sure, I can't tell. Dog is probably a little insecure, they're feeling a lot of conflict. They're like, oh, I like people, I think, I want to be friends, but I'm still a little scared, I'm not 100% trusting yet. We see that a lot of times in the shelter where the dog is just learning to trust. If that's the case, I want the dog to come closer to me on their own, make that choice on their own. I'm not gonna invade their space or get closer to them. I'm just gonna hang back and be like, okay, come on, let's go. You wanna come closer? And then see how they feel. We had a little dog who got adopted here recently, Lil Bella, and she would do this, where a lot of the time she was really scared and she'd kind of cozy up to you, but she wasn't 100% sure flipping over. I would just kind of check in with her. I'd wait until she was right up next to me. I'm like, okay, clearly you want to decrease the distance here. And I'd maybe touch it just a little bit and see, does she want more? Does she nuzzle in? Does she relax a little bit more? Does she seem to be enjoying this? Oh, okay, I'm checking in. You're giving me consent. I will continue to rub your belly. And then we have the tap out. So if you're seeing a lot of signs of stress and fear, and the dog's flipped over, so maybe the tail's tucked, everything's tense, that's the dog saying, please give me space. I'm no threat to you, I just surrender, and I don't want anything to do with what's going on here. This is where people get bitten, is when the dog's in conflict or they're terrified and the dog is flipped over and showed the tummy, and people think, oh, the dog wants belly rubs. They go in to rub the tummy and the dog's like, I was telling you that I'm uncomfortable. And then they feel like, well, now I have no choice but to bite you. So they're telling us, but we just don't always understand. So dogs have different choices when they're experiencing stress. All species do. All species can make these choices. Fight, flight, freeze, fidget, or faint. Most people have heard of fight or flight. This other stuff is some of the things we've talked about already. Fidget would be those displacement behaviors where it's like, I'm feeling stressed, so what am I gonna do? I'm gonna fidget. Faint would be literally passing out. We don't see that very often, but it can happen with people where someone's so terrified that they actually pass out. Or if you've ever seen those videos of fainting goats, that's their response to stress. They're like, I experienced a stressful event, and they pass out. You can also freeze, which is you're kind of stuck between fight or flight, and you're like, I don't really know what to do. Flight, run away, fight, obviously. So dogs, why might they go one way or the other? Could be something called learned helplessness, which we'll see an example of later and we'll talk about. Basically, it's where the dog has experienced that they have no control over outcomes or their environment. Maybe they've experienced a lot of punishment, so they just give up. They stop doing anything. The dog might think that they have an inability to choose flight. So maybe they're on leash or in their kennel and they feel cornered. Maybe their natural reaction would be to run away and choose flight, but they think that they're trapped, so they feel like they don't have the option to do anything other than fight. It could be a learned behavior, it could be the genetics. You know, you can have a bunch of dogs in the same litter raised the same way and one is just more fearful than the other. It's just kind of part of who they are. Or maybe the dog has learned over time, no one respects when I'm giving all of these signals that I want to run away and I'm uncomfortable, so I'm gonna try and fight and bare my teeth and, ooh, it worked. People ran away, yay! Fight is great. So that can be a learned behavior. Dogs can have a lowered threshold for ability to tolerate stress. So what I mean by that is just naturally they don't deal with stress well. So just like people, some people are great under pressure, they're great in a crisis, they keep their head, they're calm, cool, collected, and that's how they respond to stress. It just doesn't affect them as much. And then there's some people who, cry over spilled milk and get upset easily, frazzled easily. So you can have dogs, like I said earlier, they just have a different response to stress. So some dogs come to the shelter, it doesn't seem to bother them. They're still totally happy, wiggly dogs, and they don't seem to care. And other dogs fall apart, and it's just their ability to tolerate stress. There's also something called trigger stacking. That's where you have one stressor after another and they build on each other. So I had someone explain this to me before as thinking of it like a teapot on the stove. So you start by just turning on the heat, and then nothing happens yet, you just turn on the heat. Then the water gets warmer, and then it starts to simmer, and then it boils, and then finally we have the whistle goes off. That's because of all these different elements. So this could be like, I woke up late, I spilled coffee on myself, I was in a traffic jam, and then I come into work, and Katie says, hey Janelle, how are you? And I'm, don't talk to me, I'm upset. She's like, geez, I just said hi, why are you yelling at me? I'm like, I'm sorry Katie, I was just, had trigger stacking, I had a terrible morning, everything went wrong. So Katie saying hi to me wouldn't normally upset me, but if I have that horrible morning, all of a sudden my stress level is here. So if you think about our dogs in the kennel, they're surrounded by other dogs barking, people are passing back and forth, and they have to go through all of these different stressors just to get out the door. So by the time you're at Santa Monica Sepulveda and there's someone with a weed whacker, the dog might totally lose it. Whereas if they were having a great day and there's a weed whacker, maybe they wouldn't care. And then you can also have fight as a result of over-arousal. So this can happen sometimes in play dates with dogs. Their adrenaline's up, their heart rate's up, there's increased muscle tension, and that just ends up triggering a fight. I think of this like sporting events, or people in a bar. So people that might not normally start a fight, they're at a sporting event and everyone's cheering and yelling and there's all the excitement, and then all of a sudden people are fighting. You're like, how did that even happen? It's because everything is already so amped up. It puts people closer to that tipping point. So the same kind of thing can happen with the dog. Calming signals. Stretching feels great for dogs and people. So it's a great way to reduce tension. A yawn. So if the dog isn't tired, a yawn can sometimes be a sign that they're experiencing some kind of stress and they might be trying to self-soothe. I love this one because his little friend looks like he's giving like little kisses on the mouth, a little appeasement signal. So it's like, hey, buddy, like, relax, we're okay. Shake off, you see all the time. So that's an empathetic response I was talking about earlier. We saw that dog sneezing. That dog is the one that experienced the most stress. He shakes off and the other one's like, oh yeah, I'll shake off too. I see this almost every morning with Griffin and Weasley. Weasley comes out and they're like, oh, this walk has me so amped and excited. And then he kind of sniffs, pees, does his thing, and then he's like, whew, he shakes off. And he's like, good boy, Weasley, like, just relax. Or a freak out at a dog he sees in the distance, and then we get him away and he's like, oh, and he shakes off. I'm like, good. Griffin will always do it too. Didn't care, nothing, not affected by it all, but he'll always shake off after Weasley shakes off. So I actually praise dogs when they do this because I think at least that it's a sign that they're self-soothing, they're calming themselves down. It's a good choice to make. So it's kind of like you have a toddler and you teach them to count to 10 and take deep breaths. I really want to reinforce that with dogs, and I want them to calm themselves down. So a dog is trying to avoid conflict by just turning their head or their body. They're just avoiding conflict. So there's several examples here. I really like that both of these are kind of similar. In both instances, we have dogs that are a little more alert. They're a little more aroused. They're leaning forward, their head's up, their tail's up. And the other dogs are turning their body or turning their head, just trying to spell the tension and avoid conflict. If a dog suddenly does a sit or a down out of nowhere, again, trying to reduce tension, avoid conflict. And then a million different kinds of displacement behaviors. So anything that is out of context, all of these things could happen for a reason. The dog's scratching because they're itchy. But let's say we bring a dog in to meet a couple of adopters, and the dog keeps grooming themselves and scratching and pacing. Now, does the dog have fleas? Like, I don't think so. I certainly hope the dog doesn't have fleas. Could just be maybe the dog's a little uncomfortable and this is their way of dealing with stress. A dog may just pee out of nowhere, start sniffing the ground, they might take a water break. You see this happen during play groups all the time. The dogs just need a break, and so they do something else. Or they're in conflict with something. My favorite is the urogenital checkout at the bottom. Dogs do this all the time, so you may notice this in the future if the dog is suddenly out of nowhere licking themselves. It could be a displacement behavior because they're feeling some kind of conflict or stress. Again, they may just be grooming themselves, which is totally normal, but if it seems like, oh, why is the dog doing that now? Maybe because they're experiencing some kind of stress. Sign that you might be experiencing stress, you're going to see maybe an arched back. You're going to see this all the time, lip flick or a tongue flick. You see this all the time. The dog's a little bit uncomfortable, and you see that from the tongue. And these examples, dog on the far left, you can see its tongue sticking out there, ears pinned back, eyes are kind of narrowed. They seem like they're tense. Dog is probably uncomfortable being hugged that way. Dog over here, turning away, and they're licking their mouth, so a sign they're pretty uncomfortable. Paw lift. So this is different than earlier we talked about a paw raise. That's more like the whoop or tag you're it. This is more of a I'm uncomfortable. Someone else I know calls this a worried paw. So dog on the left, we can tell they're uncomfortable. They're leaning away from the person, lifting their paw. You can see that their ears are back and they've got these great big eyes. The dog is saying, I feel a little uncomfortable. Dog on the right is giving us so many signals. So what things do you guys see? And feel free to call out. What do you see that is telling you that this dog is experiencing stress? It's literally in a corner. The dog is backed into a corner. What else? Tail is tucked. Someone did this. The ears are kind of pressed forward. The forehead, the eyes, you got the worried eyes, the crease, and the tongue, and the paw. So everything about this dog is saying, I'm so uncomfortable, please back up. If I saw a dog doing this, I would walk away. I would give them more space, and probably what would happen is that dog would shake off, and they'd go and they'd walk away and avoid whatever kind of conflict they were feeling. So if you see these kind of behaviors, you want to give the dog more space. Let them come to you. So normal play. Suddenly this dog shakes off. They're sniffing the ground. Even a little snuffle there. The tongue, the mouth was closed and tight, and he's walking away and avoiding. So that dog went through a whole sequence of behaviors of saying, all of a sudden, I'm kind of uncomfortable, I don't want any conflict, I'm going to deal with the stress, and I'm walking away. For whatever reason, dog was suddenly uncomfortable. Okay, pop quiz. We're going to go through these, and you guys can just shout it out. If you think it is a tap out, meaning like I totally surrender, I'm really freaked out, please go away. If it's maybe somewhere in between, you can say in between, or belly rubs. Now we don't know 100% what's going on here, but you can call it out. All right, so dog on the far left. Tap out. We're getting tongue flick, ears back, great big eyes, and a lot of tension, like the head's not even all the way on the ground, the dog is like holding itself up like this. This dog is saying, I'm uncomfortable, please give me space. This guy? Same thing. Tail is totally tucked, tense, head raised, everything's pulled in, tongue's out. This one? Oh, lots of people unsure. I would call this an in-between. Katie, do you know who this is?
It's Trixie.
It's Trixie. Trixie was the queen of the belly rubs, but when Trixie really, really, really wanted belly rubs, she was all the way over on her back, splayed out, tongue out, wiggly, loving life. She was also the queen of pancaking. So this was her go-to move for, I don't want to go back to the kennel. So it wasn't 100%, I want belly rubs. It was more, I'm in conflict. I like being out with you. I don't want to go back to my kennel. I'm stalling. So she's not 100% relaxed, but she's not giving us as many signals as the other dog. Mouth is closed, kind of squinty eyes, ears are back, but she's not too tense. Her tail's not tucked, so it's kind of in between. This is Will on the bottom left. What is that? Belly rubs, right? Mouth open, lips relaxed. Clearly a happy dog, totally trusting, happy. This little kid here. Some people in between, some people tap out. I would agree. Dog is just not really sure. Also, just for volunteers' sake, we don't want taking pictures outside. That leash is way too loose. Just wanted to point that out.
It's the play yard. It's the play yard.
Yeah, it's the play yard. So the tail's not totally tucked. Obviously, there's some tension there. The ears are back. The eyes are kind of squinty. Dog's looking right at us, but the mouth isn't open and relaxed. Dog probably isn't maybe sure about going outside or being outside. So I would just relax, give that dog space, and encourage them to come to me. And then our friend here. Belly rubs. So when a dog wants belly rubs, it is so obvious that the dog wants belly rubs. There may be the rare instance of a dog that's maybe kind of like a cat dog that's like, I'm showing you my belly, but that just means I trust you, please don't touch it. Occasionally that happens. Up at Mission Hills right now, I have a couple of dogs that apparently are like that. So I have not tested that, but I've been told that that is the case. But yeah, 98% of the time, when it's belly rubs, it's going to be obvious. If you're not sure, just give them some space and encourage them to come to you, and just keep checking in. The more we can give the dogs control over what's going on around them and help them to make that choice, it's going to build their confidence and it's going to build their trust in you because you're allowing them to make that decision. So I love this because it says my submissive dog in the corner. This kind of starts to show us why using words like dominant and submissive are problematic. So we're getting those great big eyes, the whale eye, some body tension, unsure movements. Stu was doing the worried paw, my favorite. In about a second, he does a urogenital checkout. Wow, right there. So that dog is not 100% comfortable. And I really like that this person called it my submissive dog, because a lot of people talk about a dog being submissive as if it's a good thing, when really a lot of times the dog is fearful. We don't want a fearful relationship with our dog. We don't want a dog that's scared of us. A lot of times that's the dog being like, I'm uncomfortable. So there's not a great agreement around the definition of this word, which is why it's problematic, which is why I avoid using it, because it might mean something different to me than it means to someone else, and then we have miscommunication and misunderstanding. So yeah, in this instance, I would just say, Thor, come on, come here. And wait for him to come all the way over to me, and then say, do you want belly rubs? I'll give you belly rubs. But here, for whatever reason, he's uncomfortable. Smiling. Some people also call this the submissive grin. This is different than snarling. We'll see examples of snarling later, but once you see this, you'll recognize it. Does anybody recognize this dog? He's a famous internet dog. His name is Denver. I'll actually see a video of Denver in a minute. So this is an appeasement gesture. This is a dog trying to avoid conflict. Sometimes dogs will do this when they're really just excited and happy to see someone. There's a dog at Mission Hills, Vito. When he really, really likes people, he's wiggly and he does that. But he's also, in general, kind of a nervous, defensive dog. So I think that's kind of his way of expressing, like, I do trust you, but please, take it at my pace. I'm not 100% comfortable. So, like with Denver, those ears are pinned back, his eyes are closing. You know, this is just a way of saying like, hey, I'm no threat. And since his name was Denver the Guilty Dog, he went on Today Show and the whole media circuit. Kind of inspired that whole dog guilting trend. There's actually been scientific studies about whether or not dogs can feel guilty. The answer is no. Guilt implies that the dogs understand how we feel about something. Not just, a dog can understand consequences, so I do X and then Y happens. So maybe they start to make the connection between I took something off the counter and my owner's gonna yell at me. They may start to make that connection. Unfortunately, usually what happens is the dog makes a mess 5 hours before the owner comes home, and then by the time the owner comes home, the dog has no idea why the owner is yelling at them. But if they really felt guilty, they'd have to understand how it made us feel. When you really talk about they have to know wrong, this is not something that is in a dog's ability. So they'd have to know that chewing the shoes made me upset, like made me feel bad. So if you want to read about that study, it's really interesting. Basically, the dogs were told not to touch a plate of food, and then the scientists told the owners that the dog ate the food or didn't eat the food, whether or not it was true. The owners either praised or scolded the dogs. The dogs universally just responded to whatever the owner was doing. So if people say, oh, my dog, I know my dog did it because he looked so guilty, even the dogs that left the food and they said that they did eat the food, they still would even be more dramatic about their response. So here's Denver, his original video. So avoidance, he's not looking at the person, his head's down, he's squinting, closing his eyes, his ears are back, and he's doing the smiling. So this is an appeasement gesture. He just wants to say, hey, please stop scolding me. I'm uncomfortable. Can we just go back to being friends? You know, I'm just feeling uncomfortable with what you're doing. So yeah, this is a dog just trying to communicate. I don't feel good. Can you please stop, scolding me?
Sorry about it.
He doesn't even know what's happening. So this is why scolding and stuff, they don't really understand. Walking slowly, head low, poor guy. One interesting thing about smiling is sometimes it does get put on cue. So there's other videos out there, people say cheese, and the dog does this. Usually doesn't have the same emotional attachment anymore, so maybe the dog was just happened to be doing it once, and they started rewarding it, and so the dog started doing it more because it got rewarded, and then they put it on cue. So it doesn't really have the same emotional feeling if it's something the dog has learned to do. So I see that every once in a while where dogs will do it, and you can get them to imitate it because you're like, say cheese, and they'll do it. So it doesn't have the same kind of meaning if it's been put on cue. So poor Denver again, he's doing the paw lift, that worried paw, squinting, ears back. This guy here, it's hard to see, but his tongue is actually doing a little tongue flick there. So blinking, squinting, a lip lick, yawn, ears back, squinting, blinking, looking away. So the dog is not comfortable. Appeasement urination, sometimes called submissive urination. This is one of those behaviors that makes a lot more sense dog to dog than dog to human. But dog to dog, if the dog's saying, hey, I don't want any trouble, let's just keep the peace, peeing a little bit is a good way to do that. Doesn't really translate dog to human, but a lot of dogs will do this anyway, maybe if they're a little overexcited or uncomfortable. You do see it more often in puppies, sometimes just because they can't control their bladder as well, or everything is new and they're a little more excitable. So you may see this sometimes with dogs here. You go into their kennel, they're really excited and they pee a little. It's just that they're experiencing some kind of stress. So usually, this isn't a behavior you really want in the home. If you have a dog that does this, just encourage people, hey, just ignore the dog, help reduce that pressure. And you can train the dog instead. You can teach them an alternative behavior, like we're gonna lie down on our mat, just to try to keep everything calm and less exciting and potentially stressful. Stress signals, the only place that dogs sweat is through their paws. So you might see that. And then excessive drooling. Obviously there are some breeds that drool more than others. Weasley, about the only time he drools is when he's super, super stressed. So teeth chattering. So that's a pretty dramatic example of teeth chattering. Sometimes it's a lot more subtle than that. Do you think this is distress or eustress?
Eustress?
Yeah, I would say eustress. So the teeth chattering just has to do with excitement. You know, we have a little hint in their subject, which is begging for food. So there's probably some kind of exciting food there and the dog is excited about it. So a lot of times you may see this with dogs in the kennel when you're first coming in, so it's time to leash up, and they may be teeth chattering. Sometimes it can be, I'm uncomfortable. Sometimes it's just, I'm really excited. So this is a dog named Thor, who has since been adopted, thankfully. So ears pinned back, kind of worried expression, mouth closed. And then do you see the little cheek puffing? It's kind of subtle. So this is a subtle sign of stress. Thor is a great example of a dog that people would ask about because they'd say, oh look, he was so calm. He's so calm in his kennel. When really, Thor was extremely stressed in his kennel. So he would drink a lot of water, he'd drool excessively. This was just his way of showing and dealing with stress. So we're very excited he's in a home now. All right. So this is a dog that's just arrived to a shelter. Kind of does it down, he goes up, he's panting heavily, yawning. He's doing something that I call like hypervigilance, so super aware of the surroundings, like every little noise, every little movement he's checking out, lowering his head. You see this a lot. The dogs first come into the shelter, they're just that fast, heavy panting when there hasn't been any kind of like exercise or anything like that. That's a pretty big sign of stress. The one thing I always point out about this video, the lady who has him on leash is petting him. So there's a whole, people think, oh, you can reinforce fear. Here's a couple of videos and articles that talk about that. You can't really reinforce fear because it's an emotion. That would be like saying that, I don't know, I was really scared about something and Katie comes over and she comforts me and says, hey, Janelle, it's gonna be okay, it's fine. That doesn't make me more scared or encourage me to continue to be scared. It's actually gonna comfort me. In this situation, we don't know how that dog feels about petting from a stranger. Only the dog can decide whether petting is good or bad and whether they like it or not, which is why we're always checking in with the dog's body language to see how they feel about the petting. If I don't know a dog, me petting them may make them more stressed. So until I know the dog and how they feel about it, I'm just gonna kind of be hands off and wait and see what they do. If that dog was nuzzling up to her and seeking comfort, then maybe some nice soothing massage, maybe that would help the dog feel better. So my own dogs, when I take them to the vet, I know I can give them a nice neck massage, rub their ears, and it can actually help them be more calm. But for a dog I don't know, that may be adding to their stress. So people ask about that. This dog in this situation, based on what I'm seeing here, I wouldn't necessarily be petting the dog. So when should we be on the lookout for a bite? Fear, frustration, over-arousal. We'll go through all of this. So ears back, and almost all of these pictures will show all of the things. Ears back, head lowered, body lowered, tail tucked. Great big eyes we're seeing from the Chihuahua there. And the Akita on the far left, we'll see examples of that later when we're talking about arousal or over-arousal. Tail all the way up and over, leaning forward, ears forward, body forward. So the head is low, tail low, leaning away, signs of fear. Arched back, the tail is low, the tail is tucked. I mean, all of these, we're seeing all of those signals put together. The lip licking, the paw lift, leaning away. So we're seeing multiple signals from all of these dogs. The whale eye we've already talked about a ton. It's always hard to tell in these pictures. This is why I say, you know, a picture is just a picture. Dog could be looking up at something to the side, but we're gonna guess that they are scared of something. Stiff body, again, tail tucked, arched back, leaning away, whale eye. Dilated pupils, so pupils are super, super big. Later we'll talk about pupils being dilated as a sign of over-arousal. Here, we know it's fear because we're seeing all those other signs with it. That tight closed mouth, the ears pinned back, great big eyes. Hackles. Technical term is piloerection. Hackles are basically, it's kind of like goosebumps basically. The hair follicles are tightening up and that's causing the hair to stand on end. Not all dogs will show their hackles raised, and they will have their hackles raised in different spots on their body. Some it's just at the base of the tail, some it's closer to the neck, some it's both or the whole back. This little guy we know is really scared because it's giving us whale eye, dilated pupils, ears pinned back, it's leaning away, and that commissure on that mouth is pushed forward, it's very tense. I would imagine that dog is going, you know, crying. So hackles raised is just a sign of stimulation, kind of like a tail wag. Could mean fear, could mean over-arousal, could just mean I'm kind of excited. You have to look at everything in context. There's some dogs that I've had in playgroup and their hackles are up the whole time. And that's just how they are. Some people, they see hackles and they immediately get worried, but it's just a sign of stimulation. So here's learned helplessness. I have a link there. So basically, I don't like.
Why am I doing this up?
So the dog is totally stiff, tail tucked, that commissure is pulled back and that mouth is tight, ears pinned back, huge eyes. Dog is frozen, petrified in fear. This is when the dog is just like given up. Like nothing I do changes anything. And so this is just what I've chosen. So, you know, he actually gives the dog back, and then the dog feels like it can defend itself, and the dog even tries to bite him, but it doesn't matter. The person picks him up anyway, so he's actually biting him there, and then the dog shuts down. So this is something that I think is super important to point out, because a lot of times if dog trainers use really aversive methods and they use a lot of punishment, the dog stops what they're doing and they shut down, and people suddenly think, oh, look how well this training worked, because now the dog is not doing anything. And people don't understand what's happening is the dog is just scared to do anything, and so they're just shutting down to avoid punishment. So that's why here we use positive reinforcement as much as possible, because we want to have a good relationship with our dog and not worry about having some negative consequences. Okay, so I stopped watching that poor dog. Okay. So, aroused. So ears alert and forward, you know, they're zeroed in on whatever's in the distance. And when I say aroused, I just mean very alert. Head up, tail up, body weight forward, head high, tail high and stiff. So this could be just, you know, still, or it could be wagging back and forth. If you see that and we're seeing all of this other body language, we know the dog is very aroused, which could end up being a tipping point. Weight forward, pointer, doing what a pointer does. And I'm sure this dog on the right, if they let go, that dog would be, whoosh, you know, running after whatever they see. Here's our over-housed dilated pupils. This is eustress, not distress. So because of the context, we've got this delicious food. The dogs are super excited. If you've ever put peanut butter right in front of a dog's nose, you've probably seen their eyes get real big like that. But if you happen to see this with, maybe they're in interaction with another dog and everything's forward and you see those big pupils, you'd be like, oof, that dog is very, very aroused. They're very interested. Chin over. So this is just a sign of arousal. I like these two examples. This one, their bodies are more curved, tails a little bit up, but kind of half mast. I'm not seeing signs of over-arousal that I would necessarily be worried about. Some people really harp on dogs doing a chin over. It freaks them out for some reason. These dogs, I think he's just kind of excited. They're saying hi. Not really worried about it because they're meeting a nice curve. That's a more appropriate, polite way for dogs to say hi. Bottom left, we're seeing a lot more arousal. The ears are up, the tail is straight up, head up high, leaning forward. That I would pay closer attention to. If I'm seeing that interaction, I would say, I have to watch and see what happens next. Maybe one of the dogs will break into a play bow and they'll get rid of all that tension, get rid of any potential conflict, and everything will be fine. But if both dogs are like that, and the tension just kind of stays there, I'd be worried that we might end up with one of the dogs starting a little scuffle. Just something to pay attention to. Also, to point out, dogs are meeting at a 90-degree angle. That's another sign of arousal, tension. It's not as polite of a way for a dog to say hi to another dog. Just a little more assertive and forward. Again, now we have hackle raise, but more on arousal rather than fearful. Because we see a dog on the left, tail up and over, weight forward. Over here, tail way up. Looks stiff, also doing chin over, also at a 90-degree angle. So again, just something to be aware of. And there's a nice article someone wrote about whether or not they thought different areas of the hackles being up meant different things. There hasn't been any big scientific studies on that, but this person had some theories, so I thought it was interesting. So this is a slow motion video. Brown dog on the left, loose, wiggly tail. They're doing a lot of appeasement. Kind of look, I think they're kind of licking the side of the dog's face, or they're going to. The dog on the right, super aroused, tail up and over, weight forward, leaning forward. You can see their mouth is tense and stiff. So there's all that tension from him. It looks extra dramatic in slow motion. I doubt in person it was that exciting. So the person who put up this video, asks like, was it the leash tension that caused it, or was it gonna happen anyway? Can't know for sure. Maybe that owner maybe he was growling. The owner anticipated it. But you can see ahead of time that that dog is very aroused, while the other dog is trying a lot of appeasement gestures to try and be friends. Again, just things to pay attention to. Sometimes that dog might finally relax, but maybe that dog did something that they're like, yeah, I don't feel comfortable anymore. Okay, so now we're gonna watch Griffin and Weasley again. And this time we're gonna look at Griffin. And the sound is off, so we can just focus on that. So what are we seeing from Griffin? He is avoiding, he's turning his head away, he's leaning away.
His ears are just now.
His ears are kind of like pinned and they're back.
He's not interacting.
Yeah, he's avoiding. He makes like an attempt and then he decides, changes his mind. The mouth is closed, so it's not like open, loose, relaxed. The mouth is closed. He does some like lip flicking. He's got really big eyes. We're seeing the whites of his eyes a little bit. So obviously, there's the lip lick. So he's obviously not 100% comfortable with this interaction, even though Weasley's intentions are just play. Griffin thought about playing for a second, then he changed his mind. And then what Weasley's doing here is a displacement behavior. So dogs digging holes, messing up their bedding to make it more comfortable is totally normal. This is kind of out of context. We're in the middle of playing, and then Griffin's not really interacting, so he just stops and digs in the bed instead. So it's kind of that conflict of, hey, I wanted to play, but you're not playing with me. What do I do now? I'll just dig in the bed. So that's an example of displacement behavior. So now we're getting into the major warning signs that a dog might bite. We'll go through all of these. A muzzle punch, we can tell it's kind of different from the playful one because it's getting harder, more rapid, and it's escalating. And same thing with any kind of vocalization, it starts to escalate. So when you see the mouth close and it's tense, the breathing slows, and you're seeing these other signs, that is a freeze. That is a big warning sign that the dog is uncomfortable. A lot of times, if maybe a dog is guarding something, you might see this. I would back off. Do not attempt to go any further. This is a little bit more subtle. And probably all it is that the mama dog is no longer comfortable with the interaction. Puppy is doing paw raises, giving kisses, so kind of appeasement gestures in play. But do you see how suddenly her pupils are big? Lip licking, mouth closed, commissure pulled tight back. She's avoiding, and she gets tight and stiff. So, and I love the owner does it. The owner sensed that there was that tension there, and the owner's like, okay, come on, puppies, let's pick it up. Which is exactly what I would do if I felt like there was some kind of tension between dogs. I'd be like, okay, doggos, that's enough, let's go. Because I don't want them to stay in that moment. So that was the dog giving signals to puppy saying like, you know what, I'm kind of tired of this. So here we get a freeze and then a snap. So we're chewing on a ball, freeze. So there are warning signs. Some are more obvious than others. Don't you love how these dogs were smart? They were reading the other dog much better than the human. They're like, no, we're not messing with him when he has a ball. The hard stare. So this is when that dog is giving you the look that says, no way. So this is a dog named Sam. This is from Patricia McConnell's blog. She's an amazing, amazing dog behaviorist. So this is one of her clients. This is Sam on the left when Sam is totally at ease, relaxed, comfortable. Nice soft eyes, you know, ears just kind of high and back. Normal Sam. Sam, resource guarding, same dog. Those ears are pinned back. You can see that, you know, he's kind of got a furrowed brow. He's really like, you know, the slanted eyes. And he is just making hard eye contact. Even the pupils kind of get like, whoosh, constricted, or they get really like crisper on the edges as opposed to kind of like soft and fuzzy around the edges. This word here, nystagmus freeze. Nystagmus is that little tiny like subtle movement in the eyes that everyone has, but it's not always noticeable. There's actually studies that show that this behavior, it actually really like the eyes just go, you know, and stop moving. It's actual physiological change in the body, and that hard, long eye contact. Staring between people is rude. It's not a great behavior in dogs either. That's why we shouldn't stare at dogs. And if the dog is staring at us like that, I'm like, okay, let me just back up and give you some space. So the wonderful part about this is that the owner had been working on this issue with their dog. They've been investing in training just for this moment, which was working on recall and trading. So the dog was guarding this candy bar. The owner knew way better than to try and reach and take it away from the dog. Instead, she backed up, said, Sam, come on, Sam, come here, come here, come here. And then gave him something better. So thank you for coming to me. Thank you for coming when called. Hey, here's something. And then once he was away, she could take it. So if you saw this kind of behavior from a dog here, get a staff member. Don't take anything away from them. Absolutely let us know about it. But back off. Give them space, maybe get them interested in something else, another toy, some food, and if it continues, get staff. Katie will agree. We'd much rather have you leave whatever you're doing and go and get a staff member. Snarling, lip curl. Picture on the left makes me sick to my stomach. So this is different than the smiling we saw earlier. We're seeing that narrowing of the eyes. We're really, you know, crinkling on the muzzle, much different intention. Commissure forward, so we start to see more tension there. Again, you really see the dog zeroing in on whatever it is that they find threatening. I love the bottom set of pictures because it's like frame by frame of the dog getting more defensive. So the first one looks a little more like fear, those big white eyes and the ears back. But you can see that they are starting to get more defensive as those eyes, they start to really, you know, get that squint. Starting to show the teeth, pushing the commissure forward and like pushing the head forward. It's getting more defensive. Weasley. So this is me in this video. I'm putting my hand on Weasley's back. He gets shot, so he gets a little touchy about me doing that. So lip lick, freeze. See the lip twitch, little whale eye, and then I take my hand off his back and he goes back to eating. And yeah, so breathing slows, giving me the look, and then I take it off. So those are his warning signs. Not super, super obvious. He can be very touch sensitive because of medical stuff. Sometimes if someone pets him too wrong in the wrong area, that's what happens. Breathing slows, kind of freezes, mouth tightens. You see just a little bit of lip quiver, and then he'll get snappy. And then you're like, Weasley, come on, get off. Walks away. But he does give warnings, but you have to be looking out for them. So I've got friends over and they're petting Weasley on the couch, and I'll just kind of look over and I'll be like, stop! They're like, what? I'm like, just take your hands off my dog. They're like, oh, okay, thought he liked it. I was like, not anymore, he changed his mind. So that's just the idea, we're constantly checking in with the dogs to be like, is this okay, is this still all right? So it's that perfect continued consent, just like with people, we do it with dogs. We want to have respect for how they're feeling. So here's some other warning signs. This video is a little bit different. So he's showing teeth. Between these two videos, the first one and the second one, which one do you think was him being more threatening? Which was the more like, I may follow through with this? The first one. Yeah, I agree. Why do you think the second one is maybe not as serious?
It's like leaning in.
He wants you to say cut.
Well, we're making assumptions about what he wants. What's the behavior we're observing that's different from the first one?
He stops. Starts again.
It's a difference in freezing. So the first one,
It looks like he's holding it in and he's going to explode. Or well, not explode, but
yeah, there's a lot more tension in the first one. Breathing slows, mouth closed, and he's very tense and he's staring. This one, he's moving around a lot. It's a little more of fidgeting, like I'm uncomfortable, I don't really know how I feel. I'm giving you these warning signs. A little bit of maybe over arousal. He's got the really big pupils, but it's a little less of the eyes narrowing. It's just kind of wide. He does want that puppuccino though. So there's a lot more moving around and avoidance, right? He kind of does it and then he breaks and he does something else. The eyes aren't as narrowed. He's moving around a lot more. So it's a little bit more of like, I'm in conflict. Whereas the first one is really like, I mean it. Because that freeze, I really think is that difference. That's like, this is really scary. This was also the first puppuccino he had, so I think it was a little too much sugar. I have never ever seen that behavior from him before or since. All right, so Cabasher pulled back. These dogs clearly mean business. They are showing us all of their beautiful teeth. This is a great big warning sign of back up and stay away. An escalating muzzle punch. It's hard to find videos of this that aren't terrifying, so everyone is fine in this video. So the one on the left with the duck, it's an inflatable duck and it makes quacking noises when he's punching it. So he may be getting agitated and kind of like increases the intensity of his muzzle punch. This dog, I think, is starting off as play. He's trying to get the cat to engage with him. Hey, play with me, play with me. And the longer it goes on, the more the dog stops giving space, more rapid muzzle punches. I can tell he's in custody. He does that sneeze, a little uncomfortable. Yeah, he starts vocalizing a little bit more, so it's increasing in intensity. This poor cat. He's a really, really, really lucky dog. So at the end of this video, the owner's like, oh, hey, cut it out. So it's like, oh yeah, that wasn't funny anymore, because they probably sensed the escalation in that behavior. So this is just something, if you have a dog that's doing muzzle punching a lot, and it starts to get more intense and hard and rapid, you can tell maybe that they're getting over aroused, and we may hit a tipping point where we might have a bite or a scuffle. So, Thomas, we're back. Snarling, growling, showing her teeth, big dilated pupils, lip licking, but this dog is really uncomfortable. So the thing is, this dog is getting tons of warning signs, and they're actually retreating a lot, but the person keeps pushing them. And so the dog is like, whatever is happening, I don't like, I'm uncomfortable, and I'm giving you warnings. But the dog is really trying not to bite. They're giving a lot of warnings, and eventually they're just avoiding it. I always point out here, I think it's interesting that you see a lot more videos of small dogs doing this than big dogs, because people can get away with it with a small dog. You don't see many videos like this with big, 100-pound dogs, because it would be very scary. So this is Casper Omega, who used to be here. He's since been adopted, doing great in a home. So this is an example of conflicted body language or mixed signals. It's a little confusing. He's actually got a pretty nice tail wag, I think. It's kind of a helicopter going all over kind of thing. But he's kind of bouncing forward, bouncing back, the ears are pinned, those kind of narrowed eyes, but we're really seeing the teeth. So we'll play it again. So Casper Omega is comfortable with me. I'm closer to him holding the camera. Someone who's walking back and forth behind me that he doesn't know that he's uncomfortable with. So he's clearly giving warning signs. And then you see when that person's gone, everything kind of softens. But then the person walks back, and he starts giving warning signals again. So it's just one of those things where the dog is kind of giving a lot of, there's some interesting body language there. So it's just an example of every dog is an individual, and you really have to look at everything as a whole. Because if I was just looking at that tail, I'd be like, oh, the dog is really friendly and excited to see me. But, ooh, the front half is giving me a very different message. Okay, so, people always say, it happened out of nowhere, there were no warnings, I never saw it coming. There's usually warnings and people just don't understand or people miss it. And that's just because we're not taught to speak dog. So they're communicating with us and they know what they mean, but we don't, and so we just ignore it, and then the dog finally feels like, I told you and told you and told you and told you, and you kept pushing me, and now I finally have to bite because nothing else is working. So, there's not always a true or false or right or wrong answer to these because I don't know the context, but you can give your opinion of approach or do not approach. Trick question, you shouldn't really be approaching dogs when they have food or toys. So that was a trick question. Okay, so this dog. Yeah, everything's kind of soft. I don't really see a lot of tension there. This one? Good, if you said approach, failed. Even the ears are kind of conflicted, but he's, we're getting that tight commissure, snarling, that narrowed eyes. This one? What do you think, Katie? Yeah, me too. So it's still kind of soft. So the ball's in the mouth, but the tongue is kind of hanging out. They're kind of like soft, squinty eyes, and the ears are back, but they're not like pinned flat against the head. This is what I think probably a tired, happy dog looks like. But I would have no problem with this dog. If this dog was staring at me while it's holding the ball and the ears would forward, then I'd be like, oh, no. This one? Yeah, not so sure. Giving us a little side eye, not so sure. This one? I don't know. I can't tell. We'll talk about that a little bit later, about breed differences and how some breeds make it harder to read than others. Tails at half mast, maybe it's just playing. I would probably know as I took a few more steps forward that dog would make a decision about how it felt about me that would let me know, like, oh, you got more tense, or your body changed in some way. That's going to indicate to me whether or not you're comfortable with me approaching. This one? Yeah, I feel like this dog is maybe a little unsure. Its head's lower, it's kind of looking to the side. This, I think, is really interesting. When the ears are like pinned in like that, where you see that crease and they're like tucked into the side of the head, a lot of times that can be a sign that the dog is a little stressed or uncomfortable. This guy?
He seems okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, if I approach it, I think the dog, it would depend on what it did as I got closer. I don't know. I think the dog looks sad, but that's me totally projecting onto the dog and making all these assumptions when I really don't have a whole picture here. And this one. Yeah, I don't know. I think the dog is okay, but I'm not 100% sure. Again, it's all going to depend on what happens. If I approach this dog and in any of these you see them get tense, or they freeze, or they start to avoid, I'm going to be like, ah, dog is not comfortable. But they're just pictures, so we don't know. Okay. Approach or do not approach? Do not approach. Again, yay, you all passed. If I just saw this,
Play about.
I might think it was a playback. But because now I'm seeing the narrowed eyes, I'm seeing the teeth, I know, oh, okay, this is dog giving me a warning. This one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uncomfortable.
I think the dog is uncomfortable. That's just me. Ears are kind of back. It could just be looking up at someone, but I think kind of the way its head is lowered over the bowl, I just think the dog is uncomfortable. That's just my opinion. I always think this one is interesting. Approach or do not approach? Some people are saying no, and some people are saying yes. Katie, what do you think?
I probably go.
Me too. I think this is just goofy, silly, crazy face. Again, I'm seeing like big eyes, but not narrowed eyes. I'm seeing the teeth just because it has something in its mouth. Yeah, the ears I think are just flapped open because its head is to the side. But if I saw way more tension, if that was actually closed and pinned and forward, if those ears were narrowed, if I saw more crinkling in this nose, you see there's not really any wrinkles or crinkles there. I think the dog's just, you know, it's just got its kind of crazy play face on. It's beautiful white teeth. Yeah, so I think this dog is just playing, mostly because the eyes still kind of look soft, even though it's, you know, it's looking at me from that funny angle. But I think the dog is just playing. This one? Yeah, dog seems unsure. Could just be licking its chops because it ate some delicious food. But I feel like the dog maybe doesn't look 100% sure. This one?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think this dog is fine. Ears high and back. Again, it's kind of looking off to the side, but we really don't see a lot of tension or narrowing. The mouth is still pretty open and loose. It's not, I mean, if it was this, then I'd be like, okay, don't go to the other dog. But I think that dog is calm and relaxed. And this one?
Unsure.
Yeah, I think this dog is unsure. I think it's kind of like this one, or maybe this one, where you're like, that dog does not seem super comfortable. Okay, so there are certain things that can complicate matters when we're talking about how we're reading the body language, and that's some of the things we do to the dogs, like cropping the ears or docking the tails. Far left, that's Georgia. She's actually one of the victory dogs. So when the ears are cropped, we just get a little less expression. Some dogs have naturally pricked ears, but a lot of these dogs should have naturally floppy ears. It just takes away some of their expression. It can make them look more intimidating even to other dogs. It's part of their communication tools that's now been taken away. Same thing with the tail. There's less tail for us to be able to read, so it's always going to look stiff. We can't tell if it's flopping and wagging. Some dogs do have naturally bobbed tails, but all of these are examples of docked tails. So we have two miniature schnauzers here. One is totally natural and the other is cropped and docked. Do you think one is easier to read than the other?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the dog that has its tail and has its ears, you can tell, is it aroused? Is it scared? Like the position tells us so much more. The tail can tell us so much more. I can't tell with this dog. They're both kind of in the same position, but I just think that one is harder to read. So if someone wasn't sure about whether or not to crop ears or dock tail, I would say, hey, it's one less tool of communication for other dogs. It's one less way for you to be able to tell what the dog is trying to communicate with you. And then there's breed differences. So we had that picture of the Basset Hound and one of the other ones, and we're like, oh, I don't know. So the more and more extreme that dogs are bred, the harder it can be sometimes to read the dog. So we've got a Chow. What might make it difficult for us to read the Chow?
You can't see its body or its eyes.
You can't see anything on this dog. Its ears are hidden, its eyes are occluded. The tail on that breed is always up and over for the most part, so it makes this a little harder for us to tell. The muzzle is so thick that it really is going to be harder for us to see any snarling or puckering. Same thing when there's the flaps, we can't really read the commissure. And it's got so much fur. If its hackles were up, we would never know. And I think it's interesting because I've had people point out before that like, oh, chows are just that way. Chows don't give you anything. They were historically way back bred to be guard dogs, but I also think maybe people are missing a lot of signals from the chow because there's all of these things in the breed that do make them harder to read naturally. A pug, curly tail. We can't read anything in that face. Maybe with the eyes, we do get some nice expression in the eyes, but any of the smushy face dogs are just a little bit harder to read because we can't see as much of what's going on in the muzzle. Huskies, same kind of thing. I swear some dogs are freaked out by the piercing blue eyes. This is just my personal experience, but it's just a little bit different. But there are certain things, huskies a lot of times just because of that breed tend to be more vocal, they howl. So if you see a husky barking and howling and doing all this stuff, it could just be doing what huskies do. Maybe it's experiencing stress, maybe it's having fun. You kind of have to get to know the individual dog to know what all of its barks and everything mean. But it's just something you would want to know. Herding behavior is going to change some of the body language that we're getting. Stalking like that, so doing that kind of stalking, it can be predatory or it can be play. My dog Griffin does stalking at the dog park. He sees something and gets down low, and he approaches real slow, and then he runs up, and then it's all play bouts and silliness. So some dogs it's play, some dogs it's actually a predatory behavior, or it could be just herding behavior, something that's a little more innate. Does anyone know what kind of dog this is? Yes, Rhodesian Ridgeback. They are bred to have a line of hair that goes in the opposite direction. So what does that look like? Hackles. So it looks like the dog's hackles are raised all the time, which could be confusing to somebody, maybe even confusing to a dog. And then bloodhound. What makes it tough with the bloodhound?
The ears, the mouth,
Eyes,
so much
ears,
skin.
the mouth.
Weight.
Yeah, the weight of that makes it really hard for us to have more expression. And the eyes, it does make it hard to read. I have a personal experience here with a Great Dane whose eyes were like that. Owners brought the dog to do a meet and greet. They brought the dog out of the car. I said, okay, I'll be handling your dog. Is that okay? And they're like, well, they're really strong. I'm like, okay. And I look at the dog and it just stares at me and then goes, oh, and lunges at my face. And I think what I was missing was some of that body language because its ears were cropped and its eyes were like this where I could hardly see the eyes at all. And it's got that big muzzle. These are called pendulous fleas, in case you were wondering. It looks like that. So it made it really hard for me to read that dog. So maybe if I had been able to get a little more information from its face, I would have been a little more prepared to know that dog was not comfortable with me looking at him. But he gave me a very clear warning after that. I was like, okay, you will handle your dog, not me. And then we have to consider different medical things that can change their body language, that can change some of the signals they give us. Even if the dog has a historical medical condition that is no longer present, that can change certain behaviors. So I've seen a lot of dogs, poodle type dogs that have been severely matted in the past, that it can change because they're so used to being constricted, it can change the way they move. And they will maybe always be slightly more touch sensitive because it's very painful to have mats. And so maybe those dogs don't give as many signals, but they're just a little more touchy. This is Meadow. She's a dog that's at Mission Hills right now, and I love her. So when you see a cauliflower ear like this, that's from a history of chronic ear infections or untreated ear infections. So obviously we have less restricted movement there, so we're not getting as much from that. And also they may be sensitive. They may be tilting their head if they have an ear infection. They may be shaking their head a lot. So they're not shaking off, they're actually shaking their head because of the ears. So again, just things to take into consideration. Hip dysplasia, obviously gonna change things. If the dog's just geriatric, arthritis, and they may be blind or deaf. There's some dogs that actually have OCD or mental illness. That's really common in bull terriers. They're really prone to repetitive obsessive behaviors like tail chasing. They're also prone to being blind or deaf or visual impairment. So that's just something that's going to change the body language and how we're reading that dog. And then I just included Weasley because he was so sad. But that's a lot of Weasley's history of chronic ear and skin infections, that it does affect his future behavior and some of his sensitivities. All right, so context matters. We want to take in the whole picture. We're looking at the whole dog and the environment and the circumstances, what we know about the dog, what we don't know about the dog. We're going to consider everything. So here we have to consider they're in a shelter. It's a stressful environment, and we don't know the dog. We don't know their history. We want you to evaluate body language before you even get in the kennel, maybe even before you get close to the kennel. Because they see us and they're already going to start giving us signals before we even get there. So how they're behaving in there, it's going to change our body language, which is this right here. We use our body language to communicate with dogs. If I want to be less threatening to a dog, I'm going to turn, give them my side, make myself smaller, look away, I'm not going to stare, lower my head. Everything that I can do to just be like, hey, I'm not a threat. If you ever have a dog that seems unsure, crouch down and give them your side and don't look at them. I bet 75% of the time, totally made that number, but a lot of the time, the dog is probably going to be like, oh, and then approach you. So I would encourage you to test that out with dogs in the kennel. Walk up, see what they're doing, crouch down, give them your side, look away, and a lot of the times, they'll walk right up. If you're ever uncomfortable, disengage. Like I said, if you see any signs that the dog may be resource guarding and they're uncomfortable, don't walk that dog. Walk away. If they're in the yard and you're like, whoa, something is really weird happening here, I feel really uncomfortable, get help. And ask questions. So sometimes you can have dogs that have really conflicting body language and you just don't know. Ask staff. We had a dog named Jubilee who frothing at the mouth, jumping at the counter. She was so snorty and growly. She looked terrifying, but she was actually a super sweet dog, and she was really excited. So we said, she's never going to stop barking. Just go in her kennel. She's fine. So we know the dogs, or maybe we don't know the dogs. So you want to ask us if you see anything that you're not sure about, and that's why staff is here. We're here to help. Perfect. So you guys have any questions?